Cyber Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. I think that intro went rather well, don't you think?
I think it went rather well, and I think maybe the bots need to be schooled a little bit about the male-female thing, you know?
Well, you know, we're all part of the same team. You know, names don't really
That's
matter
true.
at the end of the day, Christina. So how are you?
We get ourselves mixed up all the time.
All the time. So
I am well. Mm-hmm. I am in a household of people with a cold or fighting a cold.
Uh-oh.
And I have quarantined myself in my office for the day.
Yeah.
So I don't get sick.
Yeah.
Well, how are you, Rory?
Well, I'm not that well, I must say. I felt better. I've also felt a lot worse, but I am.
Oh dear.
I've got some kind of allergy, something wrong with my humours. I may need some leeches or something.
You need bloodletting.
Yeah,
maybe.
bloodletting leeches. Just to kind of.
And what did you call it? Lurgy?
Allergy. Yeah, allergy
What's
is like
allergy?
a general malaise, some kind of allergy.
Okay. I'm learning a whole new language. Thanks for that.
Fine. Yeah.
Hey, we have some good stories coming up, don't we?
We do. And there's a few to follow up on. We always like a good follow-up story, don't we? Because there's a number of things that have been rumbling on in the background. And remember all the stuff we talked about with the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack?
Who could forget?
Who could forget? Well, some analysis by the Bank of England came out during the week, which illustrated the much wider economic fallout from it. And I think it's important that we mention that because it kind of ups the stakes in terms of how a cyber attack like the JLR one can affect the economy of a country, not just the fortunes of an individual organization. Yeah,
no, I think that'll be a good follow-up in a bad way, or a bad follow-up in a good way. But it's necessary. We're also looking at vulnerability management vendor Intruder. They have published a exposure management index, and so we've taken a look at that. It looks at the small and medium business sector, so we'll be seeing an interesting perspective regarding the challenges faced, in that smaller segment versus the larger segment.
Yeah, which is important because that's often overlooked by, what's happening in the biggest companies tend to be the focus.
Yeah. Well, and the smaller sector is actually a larger swath of the economies.
It is.
They make up more of the, GDP, I think, than the large ones. And yet it's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
We tend to cover the 20% who are the largest and the most impactful. But the 80% actually has a lot riding on cybersecurity. So we'll look at that together, which will be interesting.
And then we've also got a great guest this week, Mike Perez. He's a director at Context Security, who are part of the Ekco service provider. And we'll be chatting with him about DLP, so data loss prevention, forensics, and incident response, risk management, etc. So again, all timely stuff given the other things we'll be talking about.
Indeed, and some of my favorite topics those are.
Yes.
Yeah.
But first of all, curious case of mistaken identity. I haven't
told
you about this, Christina.
No, I haven't heard this yet.
Given the topic of identity. So, when you go to a trade show or some kind of event and they scan your badge, and then people will follow up with you, to see if you want to have a briefing, or they might be a salesperson looking to see if you're interested in one of their products or services. So I got a call out of the blue from this company. I won't say who it was because it was a bit embarrassing all round. Who said, "Oh, is that Rory Duncan?" Yes, it is. "Oh, yeah, I wanted to follow up about we met during the InfoSec Europe show, whatever it was." "Great, how can I help?" He said, "Well, you work for Wella, don't you?" I'm like, "What?" The hair company? I'm like,
"Oh,
ha ha ha. Is this a joke? Is this a joke?" No, joke. What? It's not a joke. So it turns out, and for those listeners who don't know me, I haven't seen a picture of me, I'm quite bald. My hair started to fall out when I was 14 years old, and it hasn't really looked back since. So anyway, apparently there is a chap with exactly the same name. So there's a Rory Duncan who works in
Really?
cybersecurity for Wella in the UK, and I looked him up and tried to connect with him on LinkedIn. So that was
Oh, that's
hilarious.
funny. That
And
is hilarious. You don't really need the hair products, do
no,
you?
absolutely not. So
Yeah.
what was interesting was that the chap I was speaking to on the phone was typing away, and he said, "Yeah, it's one name, but there's two mobile numbers. This number isn't yours, is it?" "No." "Ah," he said, "so they've obviously, what they've done is two people, and they've merged it into one record and
Right.
put two mobile numbers on." So there you go. So I have
Well,
a namesake who does have
but
a
I
good head
wonder
of
if
hair.
his first name is the same as yours, and we won't say it
No,
here
no,
so the
no, no.
bots don't pick it up. But maybe his first name is Rory.
Yeah, maybe. So there you
Maybe.
go. That was my bizarre phone call of the week.
Very strange. All right. Well, I'm glad you've sorted it. And before we jump into the news, just a quick friendly reminder, folks, sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already. Signal, not noise, is the newsletter. And it is something that comes out, it's supposed to be monthly, but at this point it's probably every 6-8 weeks. But we'll get back on it after the new year because we'll have a lot more to say. And you can sign up on richmondadvisorygroup.com. On the front page down at the bottom, there's a subscription box.
Let's go through our news stories then. And the first
Shall
one,
we?
the first one I think we mentioned at the top of the show was that the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack that happened over the summer, which shut production for about a month, has had actually a noticeable effect on the overall UK economy, not just the fortunes of JLR itself. And this is from the Bank of England that said that the cyber attack contributed directly to the UK's unexpectedly slower GDP growth, which that's very, very significant. It said an announcement on last Thursday, the Bank of England, it had held its interest rates at 4% because they always look to see what's happening with growth and so on. It said the UK's headline GDP grew by a projected 0.2% in Q3, a slight fall compared with the 0.3% that they'd predicted. Weaker exports to the US plus the JLR cyber attack was a significant contributing factor. So much so the government actually had to step in and offer financial support to Jaguar Land Rover. Remember I mentioned it was something like a 1.4, 1.5 billion pound loan.
Huge.
So there we go. And as it said, that this is thought to be the first case in which a cyber attack has caused material economic and fiscal harm to the UK overall, to an actual country.
But I want to go back to one thing you said there. You said weaker exports to the US plus the cyber attack. So do they break it out? They probably don't. But I wonder how much the tariffs and the challenge of exporting is also impacting the UK economy. But of course, that doesn't diminish the fact that this was a massive attack, right?
Yeah, I think on the tariff side, it's got less affecting the UK in as much as the UK doesn't really have a trade deficit with the US. We import more than we export, so it's less of an issue for the UK. But what I thought was most interesting was that the Cyber Monitoring Centre, so that's CMC, had categorised this as a 3 out of 5, which is quite severe. So Richard Horne, NCSC chief exec, said that cybersecurity is now a matter of business survival and national resilience. I think,
dun, dun.
Yeah, and you pointed that out, actually.
Been.
Yeah, it kind of always has been, but I think for a less technically aware and less perhaps cyber aware country such as the UK in the last few years has seen it become much more in the public eye and much more serious. In the last year, we've seen huge attacks on manufacturing and retail, Harrods, Marks and Spencers, Jaguar Land Rover and a bunch of others, and this is now very much top of mind. The fact that now in the UK, at least, we've got cybersecurity as a national security and resiliency issue is good. It's about time, but it's still...
It is.
Yeah, it shows you what the effects can be.
I thought it was an interesting quote that he said, the time to act is now, that this demands urgency from every business leader, that hesitation is a vulnerability, And the future of their business depends on the action they take today. And the future of the resilience of the UK economy potentially rests on that as well. But the challenge is what to do and how to get the budget. And it's the age-old conundrum of act now and don't hesitate. But some don't know what to do, number one. Some can't get budget, number two. So I thought it was a good call to action, and maybe a little bit more guidance as well would be good. So I loved the Cat 1, Cat 5 chart. Folks, look it up if you can. This story came from the Register, and it was on the 7th of November, and there is a chart there that has Cat 0 through Cat 5. It's almost like the hurricane warnings.
Yes.
Cat 3 is quite severe. So then we took a look at Intruder's 2025 Exposure Management Index. You've called this out. It looks at the small and mid-sized companies, the 1 to 2,000 employees. It tracks how they're exposed to security vulnerabilities and how and why their responses vary and what can be learned from those patterns. So what did you learn, Rory, on this one?
Well, I thought it was interesting, and I put a couple of points in here. Again, it relates back to the first story we talked about, which is Intruder calls out the fact that small vendors are often part of critical supply chains.
Right.
And they remain attractive entry points for attackers seeking leverage over larger organizations, which is basically what happened in JLR's case. It was a company in their supply chain. We saw that with Marks and Spencer's, the same, and I'm sure there are others as well. If that is the vulnerability, it puts enormous pressure on these smaller organizations who, as you said, may lack the resources or the budget to have the same kind of robust security measures in place to stop things like phishing attacks or other forms of identity attack. So that's the first thing I saw. The second point was, and I wanted to get your take on this, was the fact that the report points out how AI is being used to weaponize old, or they call old, critical vulnerability exploits, the CVEs.
Sure.
And of course, this perhaps is another indication of the difference between perhaps large companies and small companies, or companies that have addressed these already, or those who are still waiting to address some of these CVEs.
Well, it was only a matter of time. And I think really cunning adversaries have gone back to old CVEs when they could, how they could. But with AI now, you can cull through and do attacks much faster rather than the manual, let's see if this works. You can test them much more quickly with AI. And, patching is a squirrely thing. It's owned not just by the security team. It's owned by the network or the infrastructure or the IT team. And the two teams don't always have the same priority list. So, when Patch Tuesday happens, which used to be on Tuesdays with Microsoft, there was a regularity to it. There was a certain amount of patching that would occur right after that. But now it's every day. There are new patches, and across many different environments. I mean, we're not just using one company's tools like Microsoft's. We're hybrid cloud. We're remote workers. We're not behind the moat and the drawbridge anymore. So it's hard. Patching is a hard thing. And I would say that hygiene is a hard thing. So the initial configuration is challenging because we rush. Patching when we've either misconfigured, as we saw with the AWS issue a few weeks back, configuration can be wrong or improper, and then fixing that and or patching things that we now know are CVEs is challenging. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but good on them. Once again, the adversary, triumphs because they have more time, budget, energy, tooling, and possibly more vacation and benefits than some of our security teams.
And that's
shame on them,
cruel, cruel irony. Well, yeah, that's a good point. But there is some good news, though, Christina, because the report points out that in 2025, 89% of critical vulnerabilities identified have been remediated within 30 days, and that's up from 75% in 2024.
Yeah, good. So, ticking up.
Hooray! That's
hooray!
Good. But it's this sort of pushing the rock up the hill. It's the never-ending battle, right? If AI is being used for defense and attack, there's always going to be push-pull in terms of protection where it counts.
But didn't also they say that high severity, so you've got the critical vulnerabilities on the top and then you've got high severity next.
Yeah.
High severity has also expanded, I think. Although it's also being fixed faster, it's a relative number, because we're now having to expand what we look at from critical to high. And these small and medium-sized companies just don't have the bandwidth, the budget, the capabilities. And a lot of them are working with service providers. And I would just do a quick shout to the service providers that they need to continue upping their game in helping the small and medium-sized companies identify, detect, and then remediate these vulnerabilities.
Yeah. This week's special guest is Mike Perez, who is a director at Ekco. That's EKCO, as opposed to ECHO, for those of you who will not be reading the show notes afterwards. Hey, Mike. Great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Doing well, Rory. How are things? How are you?
Fine. As we said, and the folks who've joined the podcast and listening, we have snoring animals in the background, a cat at my end and a dog each at Christina and Mike's end. So if anybody hears any strange noises...
Were you recording? Were you recording when we were saying that?
No. I am recording now, though. But I do
we
hear...
do all have snoring animals, yes.
Yeah, there is a sort of a snore in the background anyway. But listen, thanks for joining, Mike, and great to have you on. We've not spoken with you before. So just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a director within Ekco, but also head of the managed security service function. So oversee a lot of our teams are responsible for things like our SOC offerings, our vulnerability management offerings, the NOC, threat intel, a few other bits and bobs that can be thrown in there. So I have my hand in a number of pies there, but yeah, just do a little bit of everything, mainly around that managed service delivery around our security service offerings for our clients.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. We talk about a lot of different subjects in the show, but one of the first things we usually ask folk is, hey, what's on your mind? What's keeping you up at night at the moment in the world of cybersecurity?
Like the qualifier there about cybersecurity. I was about to say, keeping in line with the snoring dogs. I've actually, had to move I have a French bulldog, and I had to recently move her into the bedroom after she had a bit of surgery. So the snore is off of her. You couldn't believe such sounds are coming from a small animal.
Yeah.
Well, I hope she's okay. And
she's
I understand that she would be keeping you up at night for sure. If she's snoring that loudly.
Deafening.
Okay.
But professionally, I think, and I guess in terms of cybersecurity, we're kind of coming into crunch time as I think for any of your MSSP or MSP listeners, I think it's always a mad sprint at the end of the year to try to get a few of the pen tests over the line, a few TTXs completed. Everyone's trying to get a few things done before the year end. A lot of our clients might have put off a few projects that they were hoping to kick off sooner, but now they're trying to get it done before budgets run out. So it's pretty much flat out, honestly, until New Year.
Oh wow!
Well,
I'm glad to hear that you're doing tabletop exercises, the TTXs. Those are so important, and I think a lot of MSSPs work with the mid market, and some obviously work with the enterprise as well, but the mid market and down. And we were just having a chat about a vulnerability exposure management report that Intruder put out that actually is really focused on small and mid-market companies. So I'm just curious, are you doing tabletops for the small and mid-market? Because boy, they need it if they have the people to do it. I mean, I think they really need your help.
Yeah, and it's absolutely necessary. And like we do quite a bit, ranging from the smaller organizations, your SMB, all the way through enterprise. But we are getting a bigger uptake in the smaller organizations. And I guess there is an increased awareness of having to develop that muscle memory of what to do with an incident. I suppose wildly, or broadly speaking, the approach we would take for a TTX for a smaller organization isn't too drastically different than what we might do for an enterprise. So typically what we would do is we give our clients kind of two tracks, right? It's either we can take a look at a more technical option where we try to test and benchmark how your IT teams or security teams will operate in the event of a real incident. So do they know how to use their tools appropriately? Can we create these scenarios and injects that really stress test them? And in the heat of the moment, do they know how to isolate a device? Do they know how to disable a server? How do you go completely dark from the internet? How do you go dark? And things like that. But on the flip side, we can also work with the execs and maybe the board level to do more of a crisis management, because it's one thing to know how to handle an incident, but let's say there is a breach. Do we know how to appropriately engage with our PR firms, how to deal with regulators appropriately? And, with all the new regulations coming in, that requirement is becoming more and more prevalent to make sure that from the top down, everyone knows their roles, their functions, what to do, and really try to create these real world scenarios that it's not just like a commodity tabletop where, we're kind of going through right, what happens if you have malware? What do you do then? It's actually really understanding their business as well and seeing, can we create a scenario that kind of almost instills real fear into the participants? And it makes it a lot more engaging that way too. And they're pretty fun.
It sounds almost cyber range-esque, where you're bringing in, different leaders, probably, CEO, CISO, head of legal, head of HR, the PR comms folks, and saying, okay, go. This just happened.
Yeah. And one thing for anyone else that's doing tabletops, and for your listeners here, one thing that we've been doing that's really landing well is we are adopting a lot more of AI and deepfake technology into things. So what we're incorporating into our tabletops would be let's say if we're working with an organization that has a fairly public CEO or someone on the board or a leader, where we have video or audio recordings, we're able to take that, run it, and we have a team that does a lot of this now, and they create the various deep fakes. So it might be like a CEO giving a bogus earnings report saying that everything is terrible. We could also, and we do this as part of phishing simulation exercises, we send WhatsApp audio recordings to a number of their staff being like, hey, it's such and such, the CEO, I'm at this conference in Vegas. I lost my credit card. I need you to buy a few gift cards and send the things for me so we can give these away as prizes. And it's actually pretty fun. And the look of shock on their faces now when they see how much the technology actually has progressed and how easy it is to impersonate a leader of an organization these days. It really drives home the impact now of AI and deepfakes.
So that
I love that. It reminds me of when I was with a company in London for a conference, and they did a demonstration. This is 10 years ago, mind you, and it wasn't using AI, but they said, look, we just need to show you that this can happen. So they said, Joe is going to go up to his room. Here's the room number. And they show the video of him walking into his room. And then Sam, I'm using made up names, is sitting in the conference room. And he's like, I'm just going to now hack into Joe's monitor in his hotel room. And now we're videotaping that Joe's camera, the monitor, the TV does not turn on. The camera doesn't look like it's on. But all of us in the conference room saw him sitting on the bed of his hotel room. So it's that kind of putting the fear of whoever you worship into the hearts and minds of people so that they understand. Well, I'm really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, you gotta go for maximum impact these days, because you also have to remember, if you're doing these tabletops maybe quarterly or semi-annually, people start falling asleep behind the wheel as well. So you gotta keep things a little bit spicy, a little bit interesting. So using things like the deepfakes is always fun because you do shake things up, and you can create some pretty pretty wild, outlandish scenarios that kind of really perks up ears and gets people engaged again, especially if the tabletops are starting to get a bit repetitive or you're losing the crowd. So it's always good, a nice little thing to have in the back pocket to pull out.
What do you think the beneficial effect is on that? Do you see customers then suddenly becoming much more aware of the potential for deepfakes, or do you think it's going to take more kind of repetitive engagement for that to happen? What's the kind of reality of this for the majority of customers?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and it's I think it's still too early to say for sure. So, for instance, again, with another enterprise with a very public leader there, they took a very strict approach after we did this exercise, being like, wow, we need to make sure we're not giving public interviews, that we're protecting what we're putting out there and really limiting who has access to our faces, our features, our recordings, the sounds of our voice. And so they took a very strict approach there. I don't want to say they overcorrected, because it's entirely reasonable, depending on the type of organization, the industry they're in, to try to minimize that public footprint. That might be appropriate for some. We haven't really quite seen this, how it propagates down back to the individual. So, the salesperson, the analyst, the person working in accounts and finance, they're typically not involved in these tabletop exercises. So I think the impact of what we're doing at that level often doesn't really flow down all the way to that level. And unfortunately, those are the people that are still getting largely targeted during attacks. And so we quite haven't seen the impact of that flow down to that degree yet, but who knows? Maybe we can come up with better ways of wider outreach using something like deepfakes. But right now we're still, I think, fairly limited to just the traditional phishing simulations with how we kind of engage with the broader employee base.
It's hard when your hair is on fire to think about the calm days and preparing for the future. And it's likewise a very difficult thing to be strategic in cybersecurity when your hair is on fire. And so one of the things that I've touted for probably 20 years of my career as an analyst is incident readiness. And tabletops are a huge part of that. But having your operating plan, your playbook for an incident, having your run book technically, for exactly what you were saying, Mike, about, do you know how to go dark? Do you know how to take this device off? Do you know how to turn this server off, literally? Or do you know how to route it to a different server? And are you working well with your IT comrades? Is there a quick way that you can reconfigure something, patch something, whatever it may be that needs to happen? So that preparedness, I like to bring in the Boy Scouts occasionally and talk about, be prepared, because you really do need to be prepared, both in terms of having your strategic security program set up, how you're going to handle risk management, how you're going to handle incident readiness and response, how you're going to handle all the different technological aspects of it. But then you have to be prepared for the cleanup on aisle 3, as I like to say, because it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if or when anymore. It's really a matter of how often. Are you seeing attacks more in one area than another with your clients, Mike? Are you doing incident response at Ekco?
Yeah, we have fortunately or unfortunately growing. I don't know if this is something we need to be happy about. We have a growing incident response team. It's something that we're getting more and more organizations picking up the phone and calling the hotline saying, hey, we've been breached. I think there's definitely been an uptake with our clients and what we're hearing in the market around attacks against SaaS. And I think what we've seen, at least, has always been a bit of a blind spot with, I guess, a traditional security operations center. Often we would see is if an organization is deploying some kind of SaaS solution, like security architects might give a very high level review and say, right, let's cover the basics. Let's make sure MFA is enabled, single sign-ons, or MFA is enabled, single sign-ons established, and then you guys are good to go. But I think we're seeing now attackers getting access to these SaaS applications, but what's not translating is that back down to the SOC of what's happening on that platform. So the application level monitoring and who's doing what on that isn't really coming back down to the SOC for monitoring. So you end up with threat actors that might have had access to like a Salesforce, some kind of CRM or ERP for an extended period of time, and there was no visibility into it until a public disclosure has been made. So we're seeing more and more of that lately, which is unfortunate because it's a difficult space to protect and to kind of get up to speed, to get security teams up to speed with, because I think when you try to do that application level monitoring and what's happening within either a SaaS or even a bespoke application, it requires security teams to really get under the hood to understand what does good look like, what does bad look like. It's not like a traditional endpoint alert or an EDR alert saying, oh, there's malware here. It goes into more behavioral analytics potentially. So it's a complicated area, but we're seeing more and more of that lately these days.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike, for fielding all the questions, which we gave you no chance to prepare for, but that's fine. Hopefully it was much more fun just to kind of chat and talk about top of mind stuff. So we appreciate you coming on. Thanks for that, and hope we can have you back on the show at some point in the new year, perhaps.
Oh, geez, yeah, anytime. This has been great, guys. Really appreciate the time, Rory and Christina.
Okay,
thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was another great chat, this time with Mike. Really good to have guests on who are enthusiastic about what they do and are knowledgeable as well at the same time, don't you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the chat, and DLP is definitely having a resurgence, and I think he's right. It's due in large part to how Microsoft has made things more simple with Purview, if that word can really be used with DLP. But I think it also opens a lot of services up for the business side that he was mentioning. So, yeah, and then after we stopped recording, he mentioned, how much he would love to chat more about the impact on data through AI usage. And so we'll have him back to talk about that. That would be great.
Yes. So, Christina, we are winding down the episodes for the year, although, perhaps we're saving the best for last, because over the next few weeks, we're going to be providing eager listeners with some of our insights and predictions for 2026.
Yeah, but not the same old tired, wah, 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 writing.
Yeah, AI.
Well, yeah. AI will be in some of the predictions, Rory. We can't ignore it.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, well.
But I think it'll be a different twist on it. And so we're working hard right now on, putting together our thoughts for 2026, what you should be thinking about. But we're also doing a year in review. And we're using some of the very same technologies we have been talking to folks about this year. So, stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that. There is a valid reason and certainly a really good way to look at the future by looking at the past, looking back in order to move forward without...
Exactly.
I think that's probably the third cliche in a row I've done there, but you get the point. The point is that, there's no point looking at the future unless you consider the past. And with that, we shall be looking at visual means to convey some of our thoughts, whether that's video, whether that's a mind map, whether it's some kind of visual approach to telling the story. So we hope that you think that it'll be much more interesting and not just yet another list of bullet points that everybody else does. Yeah. So
it's the end of the world. Everything's going to be AI. Well, we're not going to do that. But everything is incorporating some of the productivity given us by AI. So, we'll talk more on that. And then next week, we have Carrie Hudgens joining us from Fortra. So that should be an interesting chat. And we're winding down the year. We only have 6 more episodes. 7.
Like that. If you have any feedback on what we've been doing, what we could be doing, what we should be doing, or in fact what we should not be doing, then please get in touch. And you can get hold of us through email, which is for me, Rory at richmondadvisorygroup.com.
And for me, Christina at richmondadvisorygroup.com. And this time the bots got it right, Rory. We didn't switch for each other. So there you go, folks. Please reach out. Let us know what we're doing well. But even more importantly, give us some constructive feedback if you think something should change.
And on that note, we'd like to thank you for listening, hoping you can join us again next week for Cybersecurity episode 44. And with that, say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.